After witnessing the beauty of X-Men 97 this year, I was reminded of one of the coolest aspects about the show, the credits. The animation style overall for the entire show was just absolutely phenomenal and amazing, to say the least. And after breaking down the animation style, you can actually see where 2D meets 3D throughout the show. I love the use of this technique throughout the Spider-Verse films, and I even loved it throughout most of Invincible. Kind of. We'll put an asterisk on that until season 3 comes out. But I believe that the best showcase for the entire animation style for this first season is wrapped up in a nice little bow at the very end of the show, or at least in the first half of the credit sequence at the end of each episode. I love the character turnarounds so much, and they were a nice little cap for the end of each episode. On top of all that, the turnarounds served to show off the personalities of each team member, from Wolverine to Jubilee to Bishop to Cyclops. So, ... You probably know where this is going. I probably shouldn't have to tell you. I got my characters, I got some props, I got Blender. Let's copy the X-Men. Again, ... Don't tell Marvel this time though. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Blender Discourse course. I'm going to skip the entire intro and just go straight into all of the other good stuff. So if you're new here, feel free to hit that like button right next to the subscribe button. And while you're down there, leave a comment at the end of the video and tell me if you've seen X-Men 97 yet, or if you think 3D and 2D animation should be mixed together a lot more often for shows to make them a lot more vibrant or stylized. With all that being said, let's copy the X-Men. I'm serious, don't tell Marvel though, please. I can't handle another lawsuit. Frivolous litigation aside, this entire scene was extremely hard to put together. But I can say that about the previous scenes, and I'm probably going to say that about most of the other scenes that I eventually put together. I knew what I was getting into with these models, or at least with this whole scene that I put together. So specifically for my character Alex, the one in red, well, they're both in red technically, but the one that has the finalized suit that's in red and with also who has the wings, she has a specific set of hair texture that after setting up this scene and going through and making sure everything was named properly, making sure the stage and the environment was set up right, also the lighting, because lighting is important too. After all of that, I realized, oh, I'm gonna have a big problem with her when I get to her solo turnaround. And I did. It basically took double the amount of time as I was rendering everything at the end of this, but overall I had a good time. I decided to start with splitting up the turnarounds into 3 sections. The first one, which I thought was actually going to be the hardest one, but I did not know what I had in store for myself. For the first turnaround, I decided to have both Alex and Laura together, this time just in some cool action poses, and I decided to just figure out what I wanted to have. The best and worst problem when it comes to actually working with models, especially rigged models in Blender and any other 3D software, is what pose do they need to have? Because just like in actual traditional drawing, the pose that they have needs to have enough energy to express that line of action. That fabled line of action that isn't actually as fabled as you think it is. It's extremely real once you figure out what you want to do with the pose. Something that I quickly realized, and then after realizing all that, I had to make sure everybody's neck was all right. I didn't realize how much sculpting I was going to have to do for both Laura and Alex once I actually got around to working on their models. I kind of realized too late, but I also know the solution to the problem. Basically, I have to do a lot of sculpting around their clothing in order to bring it out or push it in depending on what their poses are. Specifically, and you'll notice this a little bit more for the hands, I actually have to sculpt the gloves on their hands a little further out, or at least pull them out in order to make sure their skin does not clip through. When I first got the models, that was a big problem that I had to figure out, but with the help of the guy who actually helped me make the models, it really wasn't that big of a deal. And then everything crashes. But, it's all right. Like I said, I knew I was going to have a big problem once I actually finished that first scene. Setting up the lighting and the cameras the way I wanted to in the first scene allowed me to just copy and paste them into the next 2 scenes, which made the entire scenario a lot easier. And one thing I do love about working with 3D models is that the lighting and the shadows are always malleable. Even in digital art, you have to make a couple of changes to certain layers and stuff like that. But when you're working with 3D models, changing lighting is as simple as turning the light off or increasing the intensity. And after a couple of lighting shenanigans that I just decided to leave out of the video because why not, we finally actually moved to Laura's solo turnaround. This one was a lot simpler. The posing was a lot less dynamic, but also I decided to animate it a little bit more. Just slightly, and I do mean slightly. I animated the hand as well as the finger, and I did a little bit of head turning as well, just to see how that came out. Overall, I actually liked how it came out. Don't worry about the pet rock that I gave her, because that's a completely different deep cut for something else. As we moved on to Alex was a lot more complicated, also because of her hair, but I already talked about that. So I decided to work on animating her wings slightly, as well as her hands. But then, since she doesn't have on a helmet, I realized maybe I could do some eye animation as well. And then that's when I decided, hey, let's suffer for about 20 minutes. Now, for anybody who hasn't seen the second video in my Blender playlist, I decided to animate Ahsoka's eyes while I was doing some camera animation, and it was horrifying, but also it worked. So I thought to myself, hey, it shouldn't be as difficult. It mostly was, but also because the eyes had their own bones, it made it a lot easier for me to just auto keyframe and make sure the X-axis mirroring is enabled. After messing up twice and having to revert the eyes back to where they were and then get rid of all the keyframes, I got it right. As I turned everything around and then did all of my keyframing on the shield, everything was looking really good, and I was extremely excited to see how everything came out. But then I had to do a little bit of extra cleanup before I got around to the final render. All of these renders took roughly 5 to 12 hours. I think Laura's was the one that took the fastest, mainly because she didn't have any hair particles to actually render. Again, there's those hair things that I was getting tired of. Now, before I decided to actually hit the animate button for all of this, I decided to do a couple of tweaks to the cameras and the lighting for Alex, and then I did a couple of render tests. But then after all of that was done, here we are at the finished product, because my goodness, did they not turn out terribly. I mean, they're very good. I have no idea why I said it like that. These were magnificent, and I'm so happy how they turned out. I also am very happy with how the claws on Laura's hand actually did the retracting part, what they were supposed to do. I do hate that I messed up the lighting for the floor on her platform, but you know, I kind of didn't want to go back and do that. Alex's model, I liked the animation overall, but her head was spinning a little bit too much for me. I didn't want to go back though, because I'm not spending another 17 hours on this. Or maybe I will, but not right now, maybe in the future. So with that being said, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you were inspired to do a little bit of animating yourself. If you did enjoy the video, please feel free to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Tell me which animation you like the best. I personally preferred the first animation. The duo turnaround really got me, but the whole point of this video was doing character turnarounds anyway, so I think that was a win in my book. So with all that being said, feel free to check out the rest of the Blender Discourse course playlist on the screen now, and I will catch you all later.